I mean, I was just kind of wrapping up, but again, the south elevation facing the parking stalls, channel letter set, small drive-through entrance sign, and I just want to mention one last piece. The drive-through elements on the building were in the previous application, too. I don't know if I said that. These weren't added when the discs were removed. It was the discs, the Starbucks channel letters that were a little larger, and then the drive-through emblems. So unless the board has any questions, that wraps up my testimony.
All right, fine.
No problem.
At this point, I'd like to call Mr. Muller, who will discuss the parking variance and maybe discuss some of the queuing function. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Wayne Muller, RMS Engineering, offices at 50 Elm Street, Huntington, New York, 11743. I did provide testimony and a report at the last hearing. I believe Mr. Guardino has appended another copy of my report to the packet that he presented here tonight. So to briefly summarize, I think Mr. Guardino and Mr. Koch have adequately described a lot of the changes, but as they relate to parking and traffic conditions, I'd just like to briefly summarize. As displayed on the plans were prepared by Bowler Engineering. From the last time we were here, we reduced the building area by roughly 600 square feet. So from roughly 2,800 square feet to 2,200 square feet. That reduced the overall parking requirement of the property to 44 parking spaces that would now be required. And as displayed on the plans, we're providing 32 paved parking spaces and 4 land bank spots. As I testified previously and as indicated in my report, based on our observations at existing Starbucks facilities, it is my professional opinion that 20 spaces would be more than adequate to satisfy the demand. So I do not believe that the land bank parking spaces will be necessary to be paved at any time when this facility is open. There should be an excess of approximately 12 parking spaces as it relates to the project on the property during the peak times. As shown on the plans to my right, based on some concerns at the last hearing regarding the queuing at the drive-through, we've increased the queue on the property from 8 spaces to 11 by providing the supplemental queuing lane to the northern edge of the entrance-only driveway on the northern edge of the property. That should be more than sufficient to accommodate the demand. I agree with Mr. Guardino's and Mr. Koch's assessment of the signage as it relates to the sign. I guess we would call it the northern portion of the building, which will face the northerly traffic. It'll clearly identify the Starbucks with a supplemental little panel with an arrow showing that the drive-through lane is on the northern side of the building. And again, a lot of the special permit criteria that were outlined in my report, which I previously submitted, are no longer applicable as it relates to the special permit. However, as I did testify previously, the previous occupation of the property as a bank would generate a similar, if not greater, quantity of traffic during certain peak hours, where during the morning peak hour, the proposed Starbucks will tend to generate a slightly higher volume of traffic during the to-work trip in the morning. As also indicated in my report, one of the components of this project that's very important is that the bulk of the traffic generated by these types of facilities during the peak hours of traffic on the adjacent roadways are what we would call pass-by traffic, meaning that the vehicles are already on the road passing the site and merely pull into the site in order to get their goods and services and then continue on their way to their final destination, and they are just merely passing the site. So it's not a significant quantity of newly generated traffic for this type of facility. The bulk of it is pass-by traffic. So therefore, based on all these factors, the modifications shown on the site plans presented here tonight, the positive recommendation for the parking variance by the planning department, they recommended approval. My testimony before the board at the last public hearing and that here tonight, is my professional opinion that the granting of the parking variance is acceptable and should be approved, that there will be more than adequate paved parking stalls provided on the property to accommodate the proposed demand. Thank you.
That essentially concludes our presentation, but before I step aside, I just want to just kind of summarize the changes. So we reduced the size of the building twice since we were here, or since the original application. We reduced the parking demand. We increased the landscaping area. We added overflow drive-through queuing. We relocated the trash enclosure to the east as per the planning department's request. We removed many of the signs that were originally proposed to make this sign package similar to the Nesconset store. But, you know, Starbucks has a business to run. They want to be successful. We want them to be successful. Quite frankly, the town should want them to be successful. We believe that this sign package now, as reconfigured, is modest and is the minimum that is required in order for this facility to operate. So I thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
I just had one question with respect to the possible relocation of the trash enclosure. It appears that even if you move it to the south, you may pick up 4 feet from the district boundary, but it won't get any further from any of the residents. Is that correct?
That's correct. Again, it's kind of like it's a meaningless exercise to measure things to an imaginary line. It's more important to see how does it really impact the residentially used property, not the residential zone. So I absolutely agree with you. And again, we will do it. I don't think you gain anything by it.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
right now, the way it operates, you know, where it's located here, the truck can come in, it's very easy to just lift it, pull it out and go, as opposed to trying to jockey
As
and try
opposed
to.
to doing 4 or 5 turns, and now all of a
Exactly.
sudden everyone's going to be mad because the big dumpster truck is backing up. doing
Exactly, and the
5-point
beeper's
turn to
going
get the
off, right.
dumpster
We're
out.
trying to avoid that.
Okay.
So, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Planning?
No additional comments aside from the memorandum, Mr. Chairman.
Fine, thank you. Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you state your name, spell your last name?
Michael Legge, L-E-G-G-E, 165FIF-TY Acre Road, St. James, New York, 11780.
Thank you.
I don't understand how I'm discounted. My backyard is discounted because I have a backyard. It's a deep backyard. And it doesn't matter. My pool is all the way back there. I don't use it, and then putting the garbage right on it. I don't know what, explain to me what an imaginary line is. A property line. I don't understand that. 2 lanes coming into 1 lane, that's gonna be a little hairy in the morning when people are in a hurry, queuing up in 2 lanes. And they were originally, there was 2 lanes anyway, and one was just gonna be a bypass lane. And, you know, so many things were said the last time, but I don't understand the trash. I understand it's gonna be better picking it up, but it's so close to the residential property,
Which property is yours, Mr. Legge?
the one directly behind it.
So I guess there's a district boundary line, which means that there's some property that's zoned residential and some property
I bought the
that's-
property 45 years ago. I had no idea about,
No, well, I'm trying to explain that.
Yeah.
So there's a line that runs through the Starbucks property. It's not your backyard. If you look on that map,
yeah.
it's not your property line, it's a district boundary line.
if I'm right here, you have,
Could you use the microphone, please, sir?
if, oh. If my property line is less than, from where they're having the pass-through, the drive-through, it's no more than 10 feet. It's less than 10 feet. I mean, that picture on there, it looks great. But you have a row of, 2 rows of shrubs there, and then you're gonna have the drive-through, where the drive-through goes. This here, what's the distance from here to here?
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to answer that now, or do you want us to wait?
You can answer it now,
Dale,
please.
you want to just give us the dimensions?
Could you use the microphone, please?
So he's asking the grass area.
Right, the distance from the property line, the western property line adjacent to the drive-through, to the drive-through curb is 24.8 feet. And then there's actually 15.8 feet to the land bank stalls, but the intention is not to build those. It'll be landscaping, so it'll be 24.8 feet to the curb.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to point out how far the building, though, the building is,
Right, and then it's 40.4 feet to the canopy, and then the closest setback to the building, it's the 50 feet.
which complies.
25 feet of that is, 25 feet of it will be the road, or 23 and a half, but it was 12, 23 and 8 inches of that, plus you have the, right? You have the 2 lanes that go through there.
The drive-through lane is 10 feet wide, which is directly adjacent to the building, and then the bypass lane is 12, so you have 22 feet of
Right.
drive.
And then you have
And then you have your 24 feet.
but then they have that pillars for the overhang. Not cantilevered. Do you understand? They have
Yeah.
the canopy out, then they have
Yes.
something that supports it, so that it adds another foot, 2 foot. And it's how far?
Can you address the board for your
Yeah.
questions, please, and we'll try to get them answered.
Well, okay. I just don't know, it doesn't appear to be that much space, because where it is now, there's only, the curb is there, the secondary curb, and the planting, and that's all there is from the drive-through.
According to this plan, they're showing 40 feet from your property line to the canopy. Then there's an additional 10 feet from the canopy to the building. So you're looking at 50 feet
No,
from,
My point is, from where the lane is, it's gonna be 12 feet, and you say it's 40 feet, so that's 28 feet.
You're-
28 feet just to the paving.
No, can't be. It's from the second road that goes through, right? You have 10 foot underneath the canopy, right?
No, I'm sorry. Dale, can you explain it again one more time? Just explain the grass area, and the distance.
So as I mentioned, so it's 24.8 feet to the curb.
So here to here is 24.8.
At the-
Here
at the
is
smallest-
24.8 feet of landscaping.
Right, and that's
Then
at
the
the,
lane starts.
that's the smallest dimension all the way to the north at the end of your radius for the drive-through. Then it's a 12-foot wide bypass lane, a 10-foot wide drive-through lane, and the building. And then the canopy, as we mentioned, is 40.4 feet.
Can I just clarify something, because I think some of the confusion might be, you're thinking what's there now. This is actually further away from the way it is right now. We are actually bringing the drive-through lane, right?
Right.
Further away. So you're right, it is closer
But
than
you-
what he's saying now, but that's not the condition that's going to remain. You're absolutely correct. As it stands today, it's closer, but it will be further away when they build this, because the building is becoming smaller. Here's the survey. I can give you the book.
No,
So I can actually, I think I can clarify. So the bank had a remote drive-through lane. So there was a drive-through lane up against the building, a second lane with I don't actually honestly remember if it was tubes or if it was an ATM and then a bypass lane. We don't need 3 lanes for the Starbucks to
Right,
function.
you're redesigning that whole
We're
area.
redesigning that whole thing.
Right.
Right.
Sir, can you come back to the microphone so we can get all your comments on
I
record,
under-
please?
If there's an existing lane there, are you making that lane smaller?
We're making the building smaller and shifting the lane, and where the lane is now.
Where are
here
you
will
making
be
the building
grass.
shorter? You're leaving the existing,
You're chamfering the building, right?
you're leaving the existing canopy. Are you leaving the existing canopy?
Yes.
And then there's a lane, presently there's a lane next to it, underneath. So how are you adding space there?
So I actually think the confusion is, again, with the old drive-through. We're completely redoing the building. So there's a big chunk of the north side of the building that's being taken down. There's a big chunk of the southern portion of the building that's being taken down to reduce the size of the building from the 3,600 square feet to the 2,200 square feet. The canopy itself is being cut back. We're not going to have a canopy over 2 lanes of traffic. And there's a picture of it today. We have a picture of the canopy as it is today with the 2 lanes. That's pulling back to only cover the first lane. We don't need the canopy to cover the bypass lane. And then that 3rd lane gets turned into landscaping.
Okay.
And I guess one thing is, a question, all of that part of this application is as of right. None of that requires variances?
Just the canopy is still, it's at 40.4 feet where it needs to be 50.
Okay, so the canopy is the
Just
only thing
canopy-
that doesn't
Just
meet.
the canopy, well, not that's bad, that one, but this portion of the canopy here, distance is 40 point.
And the drive-through, as it will be when it's completed, is no closer than it is today?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay.
The drive-through won't be any closer, and the lanes will be further away from my property line? The 2 lanes will be further away?
Yes. Yes.
Still, it's in my backyard with the lights going through it. You know, at 5 o'clock in the morning. The last time I was here, someone said, would you want an auto repair shop there? Well, an auto repair shop would work from 8 till 6 or something like that. This is 5 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Residential, you know.
All right.
All right, I guess I wish they would turn the pictures around so that when they're making the explanation, I could understand it a little better. I was watching the back of their, in their presentation. Is there 2 lane, is there, when you come into the, I'm confused. When you come into the parking lot, can you enter on both sides?
What do you mean both sides, here and here?
Yes.
Well, this is dedicated for the drive-through.
Okay.
And if, after you leave the drive-through, you could go to the parking lot, or you come in here. right?
Okay,
You have both.
thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? No? Can I have a motion to close this application?
Just one thing, Mr. Guardino, maybe you could just address lighting?
Lighting?
Yeah, he had a concern about lighting.
There you go. I'll let Dale.
So, we'll work with planning as we go through site plan, but the intention is to replace any of the lights with shielded, new fixtures, make sure that there's no spillage over the property lines. In fact, I would estimate that there'll be less light on site than there was with the bank because we don't have to meet any New York State ATM safety requirements or anything like that. So between new technologies and shielding and everything, there's going to be probably a pretty significant reduction in exterior lighting. And then we'll also work with planning and make sure that there's a significantly planted buffer on that landscaped area past the drive-through. So, I mean, really, if you do a double row of evergreen shrubs, you won't see the lights from the cars as they pull in.
Thank
So we'll definitely work with planning and make sure that that's taken care of.
Okay, thank you. All right, can I have a motion to close this application, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you.
I believe that is it.
What's that?
Folks? And that concludes our hearing
Oh.
for this evening.
And that concludes our hearing for this evening.
Thank you.